Ethan Carter adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped into his sleek black Aston Martin DB11, the polished surface reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. The summer air was crisp, carrying a hint of excitement, the kind that often accompanied big celebrations. Tonight was no ordinary evening. It was the wedding of Lillian Harper, the daughter of Mayor Charles Harper, a man Ethan had known for over 2 decades. At 45, Ethan was a highly respected federal prosecutor, known for his sharp legal mind and relentless pursuit of justice. He had spent years taking down corrupt politicians, criminal organizations, and corporate fraudsters. His name carried weight in legal and political circles, and his presence at the wedding was more than just a social obligation. It was a sign of deep personal respect for the mayor, who had been a loyal friend throughout his career. Dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, Ethan placed a carefully wrapped gift on the passenger seat and started the engine. The low purr of the V12 engine was smooth, powerful, yet unassuming, just like the man behind the wheel. The streets were unusually quiet for a Saturday evening. He cruised along the main road, observing the speed limit, fully aware that even the slightest mishap could become a headline when you had his kind of reputation. As he passed through a dimly lit intersection, flashing red and blue lights suddenly appeared in his rearview mirror. Ethan frowned but remained calm. He hadn't been speeding. There had been no traffic lights violated, no reckless maneuvers. Yet the unmistakable siren behind him signaled him to pull over. With a sigh, he eased his car to the side of the road and turned off the engine. Seconds later, a patrol car rolled up behind him, and a tall, broad-shouldered police officer stepped out. Officer Darren Cole was a man in his early 40s, with a crew cut and an imposing stance. His uniform was neatly pressed, but there was a distinct sharpness in his expression, one that immediately made Ethan uneasy. The officer approached slowly, his right hand resting near his holster. "License and registration," Cole demanded in a curt, unfriendly tone, ignoring any standard greeting. Ethan kept his movements deliberate and non-threatening as he retrieved his wallet from the glove compartment. "Of course, officer," he said smoothly. "May I ask why I was stopped?" Cole took the documents without even glancing at them. "You were speeding," he stated matter-of-factly. Ethan's brow furrowed. That was a blatant lie. He had been driving well within the speed limit. "With all due respect, officer, I don't believe I was," Ethan replied, keeping his voice measured. "Could I see the radar reading?" Cole smirked but didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back and made a show of inspecting Ethan's car, his eyes trailing over the luxury vehicle with clear disapproval. "You some kind of lawyer?" Cole asked, his tone laced with something more than casual curiosity. Ethan remained composed. "I'm a federal prosecutor." That answer visibly shifted something in Cole's demeanor. His lips pressed into a thin line, and his hand tensed slightly at his belt. There was no nod of acknowledgement, no sign of respect, only a flicker of resentment in his eyes. "Federal prosecutor," Cole repeated, the words rolling off his tongue with an edge of disdain. "Guess you think you're above the law, huh?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his posture relaxed. "Not at all. I just believe in due process. If I was truly speeding, I'd like to see the evidence." Cole exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. "You don't get to make demands, Carter. When I say you were speeding, that means you were speeding. That's how this works." Ethan's patience thinned, but he wasn't about to be bullied. "Actually, officer, that's not how it works. The law requires—" "I don't care what the law requires," Cole snapped, stepping closer. His presence loomed over the open driver's side window, his breath reeking of stale coffee. "I said you were speeding, and you're going to take the ticket and be on your way. Unless you'd prefer I bring you downtown?" Ethan stared at him, noting the hostility in his voice. This wasn't just about a traffic stop. This was personal. He had encountered men like Cole before. Men who saw their badge as a weapon rather than a responsibility. He could feel the tension crackling in the air. This wasn't just about a minor traffic violation. This was about power, control, and resentment. And something told Ethan that things were about to escalate. Ethan Carter remained calm, his hands resting on the steering wheel as Officer Darren Cole loomed over him, radiating hostility. This wasn't just a routine traffic stop. Cole wanted something more. Control, submission, compliance. Ethan had spent years dealing with criminals, corrupt officials, and hostile witnesses. He knew when someone was abusing their authority, and right now that was exactly what Cole was doing. "Officer, I respect law enforcement," Ethan said evenly, making sure his voice remained neutral. "But if I wasn't speeding, I can't accept a citation without proof." Cole scoffed, shifting his weight. "You don't get to decide that," he said, his fingers drumming against his belt. "When I tell you to take a ticket, you take the damn ticket." Ethan met his eyes, unflinching. "That's not how the law works, officer." For a moment, the street was silent, except for the distant hum of passing cars. Cole's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered with something dangerous. "I don't like your attitude, Carter," he muttered, his voice lowering. "You think because you're some big-shot federal prosecutor, you can talk down to me?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'm not talking down to you, officer. I'm just asking for due process." Cole's lips curled into a sneer. He took a deliberate step back, then tapped the roof of Ethan's car. "Step out of the vehicle." Ethan hesitated. He knew the moment he left the car, Cole would have complete control over the situation. "Is there a reason for that?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice steady. Cole leaned in slightly. "Because I told you to." Ethan clenched his jaw. He was a man of law, and he knew his rights. Cole had no valid reason to force him out of the car, but refusing could escalate the situation even further. A part of him wanted to comply just to de-escalate, but another part, the part that had spent years fighting for justice, refused to be bullied. "I'll step out," Ethan said, slowly opening the door. "But let's be clear, I'm doing this voluntarily. I have done nothing wrong." Cole smirked, stepping back as Ethan got out, standing tall despite the tension in the air. The night breeze was cool against his skin, but the heat of Cole's stare was suffocating. The officer sized him up, eyes filled with contempt. Then in a tone laced with venom, he said, "Kneel." Ethan blinked, his body stiffening. "Excuse me?" Cole's hand rested on his holstered gun. "I said, get on your knees." A surge of anger burned in Ethan's chest, but he kept his composure. This wasn't about a traffic stop anymore. This was about humiliation, about dominance. He shook his head. "I have done nothing wrong, and I will not kneel." Cole's face darkened. "You don't get to decide that." Ethan didn't move. "You're making a mistake, officer." Cole's fingers tightened around the grip of his gun. His breathing was shallow, his anger barely contained. Ethan could feel it, the thin line between power and violence, and how close Cole was to crossing it. Then slowly, Ethan reached for his phone. Cole's eyes widened. "Don't move!" he barked. Ethan froze, holding his phone where Cole could see it. "I'm calling Mayor Harper," he said evenly. Cole's expression flickered with unease. But before he could react, Ethan pressed the call button. The line rang once. Then, bang! A gunshot shattered the silence. Pain erupted through Ethan's leg, and before he could react, his body buckled. His knee hit the pavement hard as fire spread through his thigh. His vision blurred for a moment, but he clutched his phone, gasping for breath. On the other end of the line, Mayor Harper's voice came through. "Ethan, what's going on?" Ethan gritted his teeth, his blood seeping into the pavement. "I need help, now!" Ethan Carter clenched his jaw as fire seared through his leg. The impact had sent him collapsing onto one knee, blood pooling beneath him on the pavement. But even as pain pulsed through his body, his grip on the phone remained firm. On the other end of the line, Mayor Charles Harper's voice sharpened. "Ethan, what the hell is going on? Are you okay?" Ethan took a shuddering breath, his voice controlled but tight with pain. "I've been shot by a patrol officer." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, "I'm on my way. Stay on the line." Ethan barely heard him. His focus remained locked on Officer Darren Cole, whose own face had gone pale. For a moment, there was hesitation in Cole's stance, as if he had just realized the full gravity of what he had done. His breathing was uneven, his hands trembling slightly. He had pulled the trigger in a panic, and now he was staring at the consequences. "You," Cole started, his voice breaking slightly before he recovered. "You reached for something." Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh despite the pain. "It was my phone, officer." His voice was icy, unwavering. and now you've shot a federal prosecutor in cold blood. Cole's eyes darted around, his mind scrambling for a way out. And then, distant sirens. More patrol cars were approaching, fast. Cole's entire body tensed. He wasn't expecting backup so soon. Ethan pressed the phone to his ear again. "Harper, do you hear that? Tell me that's your people." The mayor's voice was cold with fury. "That's them. Hold on." Cole swallowed, his entire demeanor shifting from aggressor to panicked man trying to cover his tracks. He took a shaky step back, but his gun was still drawn. "Get up," he ordered. "Get in your car and leave. I'll call this in as an accident." Ethan let out another sharp laugh, his teeth clenched against the pain. "An accident? You shot me while I was making a phone call. You think anyone's going to believe that?" Cole's nostrils flared. His mind raced for options, but it was too late. The cavalry had arrived. 3 squad cars screeched to a halt, red and blue lights flashing wildly. The doors flew open, and several officers emerged, but it was the last car that mattered. From it stepped Police Chief Henry Lawson, a tall, grizzled man in his late 50s. Lawson's reputation wasn't one of corruption, but neither was he known for rocking the boat. He wasn't someone who liked dealing with political messes. And right now, he was staring at a goddamn disaster. His eyes immediately locked onto Ethan, still on the ground, blood darkening his pant leg. Then his gaze snapped to Cole, standing there, gun still in hand. For a second, no one spoke. The weight of the situation settled over the scene like a suffocating fog. Then Lawson's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What the hell is going on here?" Cole straightened instinctively, trying to regain control of the situation. "Chief, he reached for something. Lawson's sharp glare silenced him instantly. "You shot a federal prosecutor, Darren." Cole's mouth opened, then closed. He had no defense. And then, another car arrived, one far sleeker than the patrol vehicles. The mayor was here. The second Mayor Harper stepped out. The entire street seemed to shift. Unlike Lawson, Harper wasn't just pissed off. He was furious. He stalked toward Ethan first, crouching beside him. "Are you stable?" Ethan gave a tight nod. "Shot went clean through. Hurts like hell, though." Harper exhaled through his nose, then turned his head toward Cole with the coldest glare imaginable. "Arrest him." For a second, the officers around them hesitated. One of their own in cuffs? But this wasn't just any case. This was a federal prosecutor bleeding on the pavement, the mayor watching everything unfold, and a police chief who couldn't ignore the facts. Lawson's face was stone, but he nodded. "Officer Darren Cole, you are under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon." Cole froze. "This is insane," he choked out. I was doing my job." Lawson motioned to 2 officers. "Disarm him. Now." Cole staggered back, but before he could do anything else, 2 cops were already grabbing his arms. His gun was removed from his belt, his wrists yanked behind him. A pair of handcuffs clicked into place. Cole was shaking now, not with anger, but fear. And as they pulled him toward the squad car, Ethan watched it all unfold with cold, unwavering eyes. Justice was just beginning. Ethan Carter leaned against the side of an ambulance, his injured leg wrapped in gauze, a paramedic securing the final bandages. The pain was manageable now, numbed by adrenaline and the steady thrum of controlled anger burning beneath his skin. A few feet away, Officer Darren Cole sat in the back of a patrol car, his hands cuffed, his face pale. His mind was racing. Ethan could see it. The man had gone from hunter to hunted in the span of an hour, and reality was finally sinking in. Ethan exhaled slowly, still gripping his phone. On the other end of the call, Mayor Charles Harper had yet to hang up. He had been silent for the last minute, watching the scene unfold firsthand. Then finally he spoke. "This isn't just about one cop, Ethan." Ethan knew that. Cole wasn't the only problem. He was a symptom of something much larger, and tonight was proof that the disease ran deep. The interrogation room, 2 hours later. The walls were gray. The overhead light was harsh, casting sharp shadows across the metal table. Officer Darren Cole sat in silence, his jaw clenched, his fingers twitching against the tabletop. His uniform was wrinkled now, his badge confiscated. Across from him sat Ethan Carter, a bandage wrapped around his leg, his gaze cool and unwavering. He shouldn't have been here. He should have been at a hospital. But this mattered more. Beside Ethan stood Police Chief Henry Lawson, his arms crossed. The man was not pleased to be here, but he wasn't about to fight the inevitable. The door swung open. Mayor Harper walked in, his steps slow and deliberate. He pulled out a chair and sat across from Cole, letting the silence hang heavy. Cole's eyes darted between them, his throat working as he swallowed hard. He started, but Harper held up a hand. "No," the mayor said. His voice was controlled, but his fury seeped through every syllable. "You do not speak until I tell you to." Cole shut his mouth. Harper leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Did you really think no one would ever push back?" Cole didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was, he had never been held accountable before. He had never faced real consequences, until now. Later that night, outside the police station, Ethan limped slightly as he exited the precinct, the cool night air rushing to meet him. His leg throbbed, but his mind was sharper than ever. Mayor Harper walked beside him, hands shoved into his coat pockets. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, "You know this isn't over," Harper muttered. Ethan nodded. "I know." Because Darren Cole wasn't the only one like him. There were others. Others who had used their badge as a weapon. Others who had abused their power. Others who needed to be held accountable. And now Ethan wasn't just fighting cases in court anymore. Now he was fighting something bigger. Justice wasn't just about convictions. It was about change. And Ethan Carter wasn't going to stop until he made it happen. A week had passed since the night Ethan Carter was shot. The city was still reeling from the scandal. The headlines had been relentless. Federal prosecutor shot by officer in shocking abuse of power. Justice system faces reckoning after shocking incident. Corrupt cop finally faces consequences, but is he the only one? Ethan sat in his office, his injured leg propped up on a chair, flipping through the official reports. The case against Darren Cole had moved swiftly, with overwhelming evidence, including dash cam footage, body cam footage from responding officers, and Ethan's own testimony. The district attorney had no choice but to pursue charges aggressively. Cole had been formally indicted. His career was over. He was facing up to 15 years in prison, though a plea deal might bring it down to 11. But Ethan wasn't celebrating, because he knew this wasn't just about one cop. Mayor Charles Harper paced the room as city officials, police representatives, and legal advisors gathered in a closed-door meeting. Ethan sat among them, his cane resting against his chair. His injury had forced him to slow down physically, but mentally, he was sharper than ever. "This isn't an isolated case," Harper began, his tone serious. "What happened to Ethan could have happened to anyone, and if he didn't have power and influence, Cole might have walked away free." The room was silent. No one argued. Chief Henry Lawson exhaled, rubbing his temples. "We've started reviewing internal misconduct reports. There's a pattern," he admitted. "Officers like Cole, they slip through the cracks. Complaints get lost, evidence gets buried, and nothing changes." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's because the system was built to protect them." An uncomfortable hush fell over the room, but no one could deny it. Harper sat down, fingers interlocked. "We need real reform, not just a statement, not just a slap on the wrist." His gaze met Ethan's. "I need you to be a part of it." Ethan blinked. "Me?" "You've spent your career fighting for justice in courtrooms," Harper said. "Now we need you to help fix the system itself." For a long moment, Ethan didn't answer. He thought about what that meant, about the battles ahead. Then slowly, he nodded. "I'm in." The city was different now. Not perfect, far from it, but change had begun. New policies had been enacted, making it harder for officers with misconduct complaints to stay on the force. Body cam regulations were stricter. A new civilian oversight board had been created to ensure accountability. And Darren Cole, he was behind bars. Ethan stood in front of the courthouse, watching as a group of young law students walked by, engaged in heated discussion about police reform. He couldn't help but smirk. A year ago, no one was talking about this. Now Now it was a conversation no one could ignore. His phone buzzed. A message from Harper. "The fight's just getting started. Hope you're ready." Ethan chuckled. He was more than ready. Justice wasn't a single battle. It was a war. And Ethan Carter had no intention of backing down. "Do you know what you just did?" Cole swallowed again. I made a mistake." Ethan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "A mistake?" His voice was sharper now, cutting through the stale air of the room. "You shot an unarmed man, a federal prosecutor. You pointed a gun at me, ordered me to kneel, then fired a shot the second I made a phone call." Cole's jaw clenched, his fist balling in frustration. I thought you were reaching for—" "Shut up!" Harper's voice was sharp, and Cole flinched. The mayor's eyes burned into him. "Let me tell you what's about to happen, Officer Cole. You are going to be formally charged with assault with a deadly weapon, abuse of power, and reckless endangerment." Cole's eyes widened, his breath catching. "No, wait, The evidence is undeniable," Ethan cut in, his voice unwavering. "Dash cam footage, my call records, witness testimonies. You didn't just pull a gun on a civilian. You shot me." Cole's shoulders slumped, his face drained of all color. "You don't get to talk your way out of this," Harper continued. "You don't get to play the 'it was a misunderstanding' card, because it wasn't." Lawson, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His tone was cold, unforgiving. "We looked into your disciplinary record, Cole," he said. "You've had multiple complaints filed against you. Excessive force, racial profiling, harassment. Every single one buried before it could reach internal affairs." Ethan leaned forward. "So tell me, officer." His voice was quiet now, deliberate.